This conference will now be recorded.
Boom. So now let's hear from Casey Cornelius and then Tim Israel, Sac County, about safety.
All right, thank you. I think I need to be made presenter again. There we go. Okay. All right, well, yeah, thank you everybody for having me with you this afternoon. We're going to be talking about implementing a comprehensive safety program. But before we really dive into that, it'd be good for us to briefly review where we're at as an industry regarding safety right now. At the moment, we are the 6th deadliest industry in the United States. Those are from the rankings that came out late last year. You probably likely remember the last number of years in a row, we've been the 5th deadliest. So the situation has improved a bit. That's definitely an accomplishment to be acknowledged. But at the same time, let's be honest, and being the 6th deadliest industry is still by no means something to be happy about. Especially when we start to think of all the things that those Bureau of Labor Statistics rankings don't include. There's a lot of things. For example, those don't include the number of employee injuries that our industry suffers every year. We know some of our staff suffer some major and life-changing injuries as well. There's also a number of customer or members of the public who are killed in connection with our industry as well every single year. And those just simply aren't reflected in those stats that contribute to that ranking. So when we look at our industry as a whole, we clearly have work still to be done. This is not a place we should be content with being. Our safety efforts, simply put, aren't sufficient right now. We obviously need to improve more. We need to put more work into this. But the big question though is what's missing, because obviously all of us that are here, we're trying to do that, right? We're trying to make our own operation and our industry as a whole safer. So how can we do that? Well, the truth is there's obviously not some simple fix, right? Or else we would make the simple fix and it'd all be better. The truth is industry-wide change is going to require us to improve in a lot of different areas. But there's one major area that we've observed in recent years that we feel can't be ignored. We're seeing a number of operations who are failing to implement a truly comprehensive safety program. Again, just looking broadly across the industry, we're seeing a number of operations that surprisingly some have no safety program at all. Others have one that's incomplete or out of date. But by far the one we see the most is this last bullet, sites that have bare minimum safety programs with little to no implementation. And that's the one that really, to me personally, scares me the most, because if you work at a site that you know has no safety program, everybody knows that. And everybody at the same time likely knows that there's risk to be had. They know the environment that they're in. Compared to a site that has maybe a safety plan on a shelf somewhere, and people think they're good. Yet that's a false sense of security because there's no additional implementation, no additional work that's been done. Maybe a site like that might not have had any major incidents or fatalities yet, but unfortunately, those are the situations where in that current state, it's simply a matter of time, according to the statistics that we're seeing. So with that in mind, what we're going to do today is review some of those components of what a truly comprehensive safety program looks like and give some helpful tips on how to actually implement these things. Now, first off, too, we're going to be going through this material pretty quickly. There's definitely a lot more to be said about all of these topics, So if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me afterwards. I definitely have a number of additional resources I can connect you with to help explain these things in a little more detail. Now on your screen is a brief preview of what all we're going to discuss. We're going to start by focusing on those first three items you see there: an injury and illness prevention program, a health and safety plan, and standard operating procedures. Now, at first glance, these are obviously all written safety documents. You might be wondering, though, why do I need all of these? And two, sometimes these terms are used interchangeably. So what's even the difference between these? Those are both very good questions, and we will address that. But first, a quick question. What are these items on your screen used for? A telescope, binoculars, and a microscope. What do you do with them? Well, ultimately, they all help you see something closer, right? They magnify an image. Every single one of them does that. Now, while they all have the similar purpose of magnifying an image, they have very distinct uses, right? Like you'd never trade out your binoculars you use for hunting or bird watching. You'd never trade out those binoculars for a microscope, right? And you wouldn't use a telescope to zoom in and look at the details of a human cell, right? That's just not how it works. They all have a similar purpose, but they have very distinct uses. Now, this same principle applies to the safety documents that we're going to discuss. So first off, let's discuss an injury and illness prevention program, or an IIPP as it's called. Now here in California, employers are required to have an IIPP. That's true in some other states. OSHA, federal OSHA across the country strongly encourages everyone to have these documents. Now the IIPP is the broad safety document that establishes your entire organization's safety goals and responsibilities. So the big key point here is the organizational approach to safety. Carrying forward our illustration here, the IIPP really is like that telescope. If someone was far removed from your entire organization and they wanted to know how your company or your entire division handled safety, the IIPP is what you'd want to give them. It gives them that broad overview. Now, one unique thing about this, obviously, if we're talking organization-wide with this document, if your organization, say, has 2 transfer stations and a landfill, and you also do collections, well, your organization as a whole would have one IIPP. Again, it's the higher level organization-wide safety document. But then this leads us obviously into our next step, which is the health and safety plan, because this is where we zoom in a little closer and we're discussing here site-specific or operation-specific safety needs. So again, if your organization had 2 transfer stations, a landfill, and a collections operation, each one of those should have their own operation-specific health and safety plan. Now, why? Well, it's true that a lot of the content between these different plans may be similar, but not all of it. Now, there are a number of OSHA-required planning topics that will likely be the same across your operations. Things like lockout, tagout, and bloodborne pathogens, and things like that. But where we really begin to separate the bare minimum safety programs from the more comprehensive ones is including in our health and safety plans things like solid waste specific safety topics and site specific safety concerns. Now, it's important to note that obviously the OSHA required topics in our safety plans are there for a reason. They protect a lot of life and health. But when we look at our industry, the major injuries and fatalities that happen to solid waste workers, they tend to happen in these areas that are unique to the solid waste industry, things that OSHA doesn't directly address. I know I saw a news report just yesterday about a fatality that happened of a driver standing behind a pile of material that got pushed by a dozer operator, and the driver ended up being killed in that situation. That's terrible. We hate hearing those things. And while we can search out and find some OSHA regs to tie to that, there's simply no obvious OSHA regulation about safety on a tipping floor, is there? And so that's why we have to go a little above and beyond, and we have to define these safety topics in our safety plans and to address the safety needs of our workers. And again, you also need these for each individual operation because each one of your operations is different, right? A transfer station safety hazards are different from ones out on the collection route, and those are different from ones at the landfill. And even if you have two landfills, they might be handling different types of waste, have different types of customers, be handling different amounts of tonnage of material every day. There's different needs there that our safety plans need to address. So at this point, we've talked about injury and illness prevention program and a health and safety plan. Looking across the industry, if someone's going to have safety documents, it's going to be some variation or degree of these things. But where we start to see a lot drop off is in standard operating procedures. Now notice these last few things, we think back to that illustration again for a second. We've kind of gradually been zooming in, right? We started organization-wide, then we zoomed in site-specific. And now with standard operating procedures, here we really zoom in. And this is the closest level of detail where we apply safety instruction to individual operational tasks. Now, developing a library of SOPs clearly communicates to your staff how to work in the safest and most efficient way possible. You know, it's true that your staff still have to read and understand your full IIPP and your health and safety plan. But you boil this down, and what we ultimately want them to know and understand is how those principles apply to the specific jobs they're supposed to do. And that's what SOPs are the perfect tool for. Now, if you're interested in developing SOPs or maybe improving some of yours that you have already, just a few tips here. Make sure that they aren't generic or vague. They really need to be specific to the solid waste operations that are happening at your facility and address the task that you're expecting your staff to perform. Now, another thing I can say, I've worked with a number of operations who maybe see the value in SOPs, so they assign someone from admin to go out and talk to the operations staff and write us up an SOP. Sounds simple enough. But that very rarely works because simply put, the admin staff don't tend to understand the operations to the level of detail that's needed. These SOPs really need to be developed by someone who has a clear understanding of the operational task that we're writing a procedure for. That's going to help make sure this document is practical and actually usable by your boots on the ground staff. So at this point, we've talked about 3 of these components. All of them, again, are written safety documents, but they have very distinct uses. But these all have a danger. The danger is probably all of us have in our offices what you see on the screen here, some shelves full of binders and plans and programs and things. And the truth is, this is where your safety plans and SOPs can come to die. This is, if you just create these documents and you put them on the shelf and that's where they stay, they're going to do you absolutely no good. And unfortunately, that happens a lot of times. So to actually get the benefit out of these things, though, we need to implement them. And we do that by training our staff on the content of these documents. What do they actually do with them? This requires not only hiring or training for new hires when they're initially onboarded, but providing ongoing training for all your staff, even if they've been with your organization for decades, regular refreshers to make sure everyone's constantly performing at that highest level of safety. Now, developing a training program is obviously a big undertaking, but a few things here again, don't settle for bare minimums. Determine the topics that your staff need to be trained on, and not just what you're going to train them on, but how you're going to train them. Traditional classroom training and things, that's valid. Those have a use, but don't forget things like hands-on training and using videos. We're finding that these things are having much more a benefit on modern workers and actually being able to digest material. And then it's also important to define what your expectations are. If you don't know exactly what your staff should leave the training understanding, the chances are that they're not going to leave the training understanding anything at all. So it's good to have your expectations in place. One thing we mentioned earlier, we talked about SOPs. Right now we're talking about videos. I just wanted to highlight one thing I've seen a lot of sites doing lately is creating SOP training videos. These end up being like 2 to 3 minute little snippet videos that are focused on a specific task and walk staff members through that. These have received a lot of great feedback, seem to be having a lot of good results. So just wanted to share that with you all. I have some examples of some of these. If you'd like to see some, feel free to reach out to me afterwards and I can connect you with that. But now we get to our final step in this comprehensive safety program. This is where we got to close the loop, because so far everything we've been talking about is giving out information. We need some feedback, and we do that through tracking and review. You've probably heard the saying, if it's not documented, it didn't happen. That's definitely true. So make sure all of your training is being tracked and documented, and actually go through those records to make sure your employees are getting the training they need. But then you should also be doing regular formal safety reviews. You can do these internally, you can have a third party help with that, whatever the case, make sure that you're performing a serious review of how your organization's doing. This is where you'll find out if your safety documents are actually benefiting you. Do our SOPs actually apply? Are we actually performing them? How's our training working out? You have to do a review to understand these things. And then you have to take action based on what you find. If you find out your safety documents need to be edited, revise them. If you find out we're missing a big aspect in our training, let's supplement that. A comprehensive safety program is never truly complete. You'll always be revising and improving it. So here, those are the quick run through of those 5 components. The truth is, we went through them very quickly, but these take a lot of work. It takes a lot of time, effort, and yes, some financial investment to implement, but it's very well worth it. While the industry as a whole might be the 6th deadliest right now, there are solid waste operations right now throughout the country implementing these exact things, and they're seeing measurable improvement from it. Just one example is a municipal collections operation we recently worked with, who, after implementing exactly this type of program, saw not only less employees getting hurt, but the severity of injuries that did occur dropped dramatically. And obviously we care about safety because we don't want our staff getting hurt. That's our main reason. But there is a whole financial aspect to safety as well, right? This municipality in particular saw the cost of injuries drop from over $1 million a year down to $275,000. Now think, they basically, by improving safety, they found an additional $725,000 of budgets. That's huge. So again, while it takes a lot of work, implementing a comprehensive safety program is well worth it. You'll receive the benefits. So that's really it. I put my contact info on the screen in case you want to reach out to me later. But at this point, I believe we were going to open up for a few questions.
Hey, Kasem, Tim Raibley here. I'm not seeing any comments in the chat box, and I don't see anybody raising their hand. So I think we're so far so good. Please stay on though, because we want to see if those questions come up later on, and maybe a tag team between you and Tim's response.
Sounds good.
All right. Let's bring up Tim Israel's presentation, and again, Tim's going to drive into a little more detail. Kasem gave us an overview. He's going to give us some real life experiences from Sac County. And for those that are listening, please go to the chat box if you have any questions. Enter them there, and away we go.
All right. Thank you, Tim. I'm Tim Israel with the Sacramento County Department of Waste Management and Recycling. I'm a superintendent of technical services, which is a real fancy sounding title, but what it means is I deal with a lot of different issues within our department, including having some responsibility over some of our operations, along with planning and equipment purchasing, and just a lot of miscellaneous issues in our solid waste operation. But I do have the great pleasure of working with some really good safety professionals in our department. And so a couple years ago, actually when we were in Yosemite, for the last time we were able to get together, we're talking about safety as an important issue in our industry, and I was talking to Dave Garridelli, who works in our department also, and I committed to presenting a safety subject at the next year's symposium, and of course COVID has gotten in the way of this, so here I am today, and so I'm excited to be able to talk about our department safety journey, I guess I would call it, and from where we were about 10 years ago to where we are now, and we've made a lot of improvements and really implemented what Kasem was talking about earlier, a comprehensive safety program in our department, and the results back our efforts of the value of doing this. So let's see here, trying to get there we go. So why a safety topic? You know, I'm not personally a safety professional, but safety takes a huge role in everything we do at my work and what I do on a day-to-day basis. And so we're all safety professionals is the reality. We may not have training and work with it constantly, but it's something that we should think about every day when we walk in the door at our office or getting that piece of equipment. And so it's a subject that a lot of times we take for granted, at the same time saying it's the most important thing we should be doing. So it's something that we all should be thinking about all the time. And we already talked about this. The solid waste business is a dangerous one. Our lost time incident rate as an industry is 3 times the industrial average. And in addition to that, you know, fatalities, there were 52 fatalities in 2020 in US and Canada. And as far as those dangers in our industry, we fall right in there with fishing and coal mining and industries that are dangerous. So those are 2 just classic industries that we think, oh, coal mining or fishing, those are dangerous industries. Well, our lost time rate is almost exactly the same as those industries. So it's dangerous out there. Every time a guy or gal jumps in a collection truck, you know, they're on the road, they're in just high hazard situations. And so it's really important that we give them all the tools we can to be able to go out there and work safely, because every employee that comes in, what we want is them to go home safe every night. That's the most important thing. Things like costs for accidents and injuries are big concerns, but ultimately the bottom line for us is we want those employees to go home safe every night, be able to come back and work for us the next day. So safety is a big and a very important subject for us, and can't emphasize it enough. What will I discuss today? So I'll tell you a little bit about our department here in Sacramento. I'll talk about what drove us to transform our safety program. How did we get that to happen? The tools we used along the way, and we'll talk a little bit about the results of those efforts. Sacramento County Department of Waste Management and Recycling. So we employ over 300 waste management professionals, and we serve over 165,000 unincorporated county residential customers. We collect residential garbage, recyclables, and organics using a fleet of natural gas-powered trucks. We also operate an extensive neighborhood cleanup and illegal dumping operation. All that material gets transferred through our our recovery station, or goes to our landfill. So we landfill over 1 million tons of material a year. Additionally, we collect that single source recycling and organics and take that material to processors, along with operating 2 household hazardous waste collection facilities that serve, well, 18,000 customers a year annually. So, you know, we're an essential service to Sacramento County, and there's a lot of different, or dangerous situations that you can get into in these sorts of tasks that we do every day. What drove our need for change? Unfortunately, in 2007, we experienced a fatality at our North Area recovery station. An operator was caught in between a door and a trailer and was crushed. And this was just a very traumatic experience for our department. And in our review of the incident with Cal OSHA, we found that there were a lot of holes in our safety program, that safety was not always the top priority with our staff and our management of that staff. Sometimes production was more important, or we just didn't make it as important as it should be. So our staff in general lacked safety awareness that was needed to stay safe. Incidents weren't consistently reported, and even with that, incidence rates were high. So we needed to really, establish a better culture there as far as acknowledging incidents and dealing with them. Our training program, while we had a training program, our record keeping of that training was inadequate. So we couldn't go and say, look, these employees were trained on these subjects on these days. We were unable to duplicate a lot of that information. So we recognize these issues in our program, and management recognize the need for an overall systemic change in the way we are managing our work, basically. So with safety, we needed to change. How did we accomplish this change? Well, one is we doubled the size of our safety staff. We basically went from 1 full-time person and a part-time, half-time person in safety. We doubled that staff to 3 full-time professionals along with administrative support. We began emphasizing safety issues at all of our meetings and discussions. So basically, what we began to do is try to just elevate that subject into what we talked about, what we thought about first before we went and did anything else. How are we going to do this job? Is it safe? We integrated our frontline staff into the hazard assessment basically brought them into the process and not only a hazard assessment, but in reviewing the accidents that happened or incidents that occurred. So we basically got everybody involved, not just management, not just supervision, everybody involved with safety, because then you've got engagement and buy-in. So, and that's where basically we just increased communications associated with safety issues overall. Tools that we used. We instituted a lot of new and different tools to help us improve our program. We really began taking a hard look at department-wide hazard identification, and coupled that with improvements in our documentation of standard operating procedures. We started using DuPont's STOP program to improve safety systems and communication. We improved our training and documentation. We increased our use of technology. That's been a big help in what we're doing out there. And we really went and developed the ability to do, perform root cause analyses and institute a more formal accident review process. And I'll talk about a little about each of these here as we go through this. Hazard analysis. As Kasem mentioned, going through those, developing standard operating procedures and identifying the hazards associated with those procedures is kind of very foundational as far as the detail and communication with the employees. And so over the years, what we've done is developed what we call a SOFAs, and what that's short for is Standard Operating Procedure and Hazard Analysis. And so we have our SOFA forms, which really consolidate these things into hopefully an easy 1 to 2 page document that our employees can review on a regular basis, that not only describes the procedure, but it also identifies the hazards with that. And so these are living documents that are reviewed on a regular basis, obviously with any new employees, and also just every few years, I believe it's 3 years with our employees in general, they need to review these. Also, these SOFAs are updated whenever, say, an accident review or there's a change, or a change in practice in the field that changes what we're doing on this form. We'll go in and update those and review them. As I mentioned a little earlier, I believe a big key to our success in this part of our program is getting our employees, the staff people, the subject matter experts on the ground involved in the process of creating these. So basically sitting down with the employee who does this work and going over, okay, how do you do this? Is this the way you do it? Identifying ways to make it safer. And so we're always looking to improve these and make them better. And so this really represents almost the core of a lot of our safety program as far as communicating this information to our employees. STOP program. We began using the STOP program, and when we initially began using it, the key benefit was to increase communication between staff, between supervision and employees, between employees. And so what it did is STOP provides a program that gives structure to that communication and a basic philosophy of observation of employees and then communication of what you observe, and then tracking that information to identify trends in your safety programs and where awareness needs to be improved and that sort of thing. And so what this program really has helped us do is do just that, is increase the awareness between the supervision and the employees, and going out and looking what's happening and then communicating that between each other. And if there's changes that need to be made, go ahead and make those changes. And so, again, this all centers around communication ultimately. Training. We've put a lot of work into improving not only our training program, but the documentation of it. So we want to make sure that all our employees are trained, and that we're tracking that to make sure that, say, for example, that dozer operator who's been with the department for 15 years is still getting refreshed on those new pieces of equipment, that new procedures every 3 years. The other big part of it is, how do you store and track all those records? And so you need to establish centralized training records for each employee. And we started using a training record database compliance suite for tracking those. It wasn't good enough anymore just to have a binder with most of the training records in there. We want to get everything, we want to capture everything, and try to make that as efficient as possible in going into those records. And again, emphasis of training issues at all of our meetings. I have all staff meetings. It doesn't have to be a safety meeting, but safety is a prime and first subject at all of our meetings. So training, obviously a huge part of it, and tracking that training is something that we all probably fall a little short in. Use of technology, that's been a huge thing for us. There's a lot of technology out there now that'll help us kind of keep an eye on our operations. GPS tracking is widely used now. We've used it for close to 10 years now. This definitely helps our supervisors to evaluate operator performance. Also provides data for incident reviews. So basically, in our department, we have GPS on all of our vehicles, light and heavy duty. And from time to time, that information is used in accident investigations, and has really helped to vindicate some of our employees. Install video camera systems. Again, another technology that's widely available now and really helps following up on incidents with evaluation of employee performance and incident review. So we've installed cameras on everything that's certainly out on the streets, and most of our yellow iron also. So it's pricey, but it pays off in the long run. So, and ultimately, while our operators have expressed concerns about videos, they've found that typically it benefits them versus working against them. So I think cameras and GPS are two widely available systems out there that will help any operation not only see what's going on, but help an evaluation of incidents that happened out there in the field. Again, I mentioned earlier training records and getting maybe some software to help you with that. That's again another just technology that can help make you more efficient. And then more recently, we've begun deploying blindside assist equipment on some of our collection trucks out there to try to just take advantage of that technology that's out there for example, on most of our cars now. So use that technology, it's there, and really helps us just do our jobs more efficiently. Accident reporting and review. This was a really big deal for our department. Previously, we didn't have a strong requirement for reporting all incidents, and this is one of the things that we've really enforced and been very strict about. So the expectation is any incident is reported and documented, basically. As far as those reports, we've elevated the standards with all of our supervision staff on reporting. So making sure there's follow through with the employees anybody involved in the incident, that the documentation is clear and thorough. After that information is gathered, we have a committee that goes through and not only reviews the incident, but performs root cause analysis of those incidents. And so basically, we take a look at them, and there are recommendations for follow-up training and or documentation modification. And then one of the important things that we have also done is make sure that the training process is separate from the discipline process. So with safety, we want to make sure we're training those guys up, and that message is separate from when discipline might be needed for certain incidents. So want to keep those separate. Obviously there is a connection, but they definitely should be handled separate so that the safety message continues to get through. And then we've done just a lot more work in tracking our incidents and the type of incidents, and an effort to identify safety trends and proactively go out and get word out to folks as to what measures or changes we need to do to make our operation more safe. So with all this work that we've done, we've seen a big improvement in our overall safety culture, the awareness of it, and it's resulted in better performance as far as lost time and accidents. And our employees are much more engaged in safety issues and willing to bring up issues and report the incidents that happen when they occur. 30% reduction in preventable incidents since 2014. We've had a 50% reduction in annual property damage and 60% reduction in our average annual DART rate since 2012. Let's see here, I've got some graphs to kind of back that up. Preventable incidents down significantly. And again, remember, this is also at the same time we're working to just flat out, increase our reporting. So this is a good trend for us. Property damage complaints, again, this is the sorts of things like damaged mailboxes or landscaping from carts hitting things or accidents out on the street. DART rate, again, this has to do with employees missing work, and is kind of the industry standard for injuries at work. So all showing a good downward trend since we've been beginning these efforts, and it's something that will never end. Will never end. But what it has done is really resulted in a connection between our safety culture and efforts within our department to just promote our overall department's culture of transparency in communication, empowered employees, making our management more approachable, and being focused on our mission. So safety really is integral with what we do, and those improved communications really improve not only safety, but our overall communications between staff and supervision and management. So, and again, I'll emphasize again and again, integration of staff into the process, into those hazard analysis and SOP reviews, into the accident review process, empowered those employees, and it really increased the approachability to our management and the overall culture of the department. In conclusion, safety issues drive how we perform our work every day. So we need to think about safety. Is this safe? And have the programs to match that. Employee awareness and engagement are always critical to safety programs. We need those employees thinking safe and engaged in doing so. And then again, we need organizational systems that support that effort. So getting out there, identifying those hazards, communicating to them, and then following up when something does happen. So, and then finally, and I think this is the big takeaway here, is improving that safety culture will lead to improvements in your overall corporate culture. Thank you. I'm open for questions. I also have our safety specialist, Mike Prater and Michelle Ballard. They're on the phone line. So if you guys have any questions, we'd be happy to answer them about our program or safety questions in general. Thank you.
Thanks, Tim. Well done. Great presentation. There is one question here from well, Larry actually asked, do either speakers have suggestions on easy ways to track trainings so that folks are not overdue? You have a proactive program for that. And Tim, either you or Kasem, either one wanted to field it.
Well, for the county, we have a program that tracks our training. And so depending on the type of training, we get heads up from staff that we need training. And so it's not automated necessarily, but we do track it. I don't think that it's necessarily easy, especially if you have hundreds of employees you have to keep track of. So I don't know if I have a good answer for Larry from something that's easy, but it certainly is a task that needs to be done.
Yeah, I'll just chime in there. Yeah, the easy thing is tough because no matter what, it all takes effort, right? That it takes quite a bit of effort to like stay up on these things regularly. So, but also easy means different to different people. Like, so I know there's definitely ones that will, you know, spend the extra money for a computer application or a program that kind of manages that tracking things for them. There are third-party programs that can do some of that, but you spend for that. But then I've also seen others who, especially if they have someone who's in charge of safety or overseeing training, they can manage that really effectively with an easy spreadsheet if they're a spreadsheet-minded person. I've also seen people who have used like Microsoft Outlook to they basically plug all their employees in and with reminders, and it makes for a very busy calendar, but that's how they track it, and it gives reminders and all those things. So there's a lot of different options. I think it ultimately depends kind of on what your staffing for your safety is, who do you have, and what everybody's skill set is, and what works best for you, kind of.
Thanks for adding that, Kasem. Looks like the next question probably could go to Tim, although it could be either one. Mentions what's your onboarding process look like in bringing on a new driver, and what are the requirements they have? They're allowed on their own while they're to be on the road on their own. So you want to field that question, Tim?
Yeah, we have a new employee orientation program, and Michelle or Mike, would you guys like to describe that? Michelle does a lot of work on that. Maybe she wants to describe it. She'd do a better job than I would.
I'll certainly give it a shot. Thanks, Tim. Good afternoon, everybody. Our onboarding process, as Tim mentioned, based upon the new employee's hire date, at some point within the first 2 weeks, typically they'll come through an 8-hour day with myself and my partner Mike for a new employee orientation, talking about our department culture and procedures, policies, etc. However, when they start on site, they are sat down first day to review our SOFA program, as Tim mentioned earlier, and they go out with the driver maybe day 2 or 3 just for observation, and then they go through what we call our blue book, which is our training on-set equipment or trucks, if you will. And at minimum, they will have a 40-hour observation done prior to being released on their own. So go through the truck, all the procedures, the sofas. Again, at minimum, if they require more, then we keep our trainer with them longer. So it's just all in the comfort of the employee and the trainer and trainee, if you will. I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, I think it did. Thanks, Nolan. Appreciated that. Thank you. Actually, I had a question. I don't see any more, but I was going to ask a follow-up question to that. You know, I still see, not in Sacramento, but I still see out on the road, big truck drivers with cell phones. Is that something that, distracted driving, is that something that either of you have kind of insights on what is allowed and what isn't allowed in the cockpit? And is that a part of the training program?
Yeah,
would you like me to go to?
Oh yeah, go for it, Michelle.
Yeah,
Sorry
Michelle,
about that. It's a little challenging on these types of calls. Our process, although the state says you can go hands-free, our department's policy is 0. We do not allow cell phone usage when you're behind the wheel. If you need to take a call, you must pull over to the side of the road, hands-free or not. Do not use your cell phone while operating, even your personal vehicle on county time. So absolutely 0 phone usage while behind the wheel.
Thank you.
And I'll add just a comment or two on that. I mean, there's a lot of distracted driving going out there, even with our operators, having to pay attention to everything that's going around them and pick up those carts. But there are technologies out there that are helping with that sort of issue now. While we haven't deployed it in our fleet, I know a lot of the private fleets are going with in-cab video that is smart enough to identify certain behaviors like cell phone usage and alerts the supervision in those organizations. And so there are things out there to help with these issues now. And obviously distracted driving continues to be a big problem, but there are things coming that will help more and more.
Great, thank you. I don't see any more comments or questions coming up, and I know we're nearing the end of the hour. I really want to thank you guys for this great presentation, and the whole Sac County group, in addition to you, Tim, and same with Kasem. We are, again, one more presentation, and we'll be done with the 1 year and 2 months of webinars. So going forward, we hope everyone continues to participate in the Gold Country the Gold Chapter SWANA organization, and we look forward to everyone being safe out there as they continue to do their work. So thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tim.